Okay, everyone, well, time to get down to the nitty-gritty. It's time to look at Star Trek First Contact. The first Star Trek movie to, pretty much have, pretty much features the Next Generation cast. I mean, yeah, you can see the same thing happened in Generations, but of course, that movie also had Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov in it, but this one has the cast of Next Generation in it, period. No other cast members from any other shows. There we go. So, basic plot of this movie is that the Borg are planning to attack the Federation yet again, but this time they have a bigger plan. They plan to travel back in time to stop man's first contact with the Vulcans, which would ultimately stop the Federation from being formed. But of course, the Enterprise is told to keep out of the fighting because of all the stuff that happened to Picard in the TNG two-parter Best of Both Worlds. Which makes sense in a way, but of course, when he hears that all those ships are being destroyed, he decides, screw it, I'm going to go there anyway. Starfleet orders are not. So there you go. And of course, Worf is there, well, not on the Enterprise, but on the Defiant, because during the time the First Contact was out, Worf was already on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And also, sorry for that, but anyway, we also have some new uniforms that thankfully everyone wears. There's not the whole mixing and matching thing like in Generations. So it's nice. And I do like the uniforms that they have in First Contact. They were uniforms that, of course, were used in Deep Space Nine throughout the remainder of that series. And of course, they couldn't have new uniforms on Voyager because Voyager was still stuck in the Delta Quadrant. So, of course, they didn't get the memo about the whole uniform change. So there you go. So, anywho, the Borg cube is destroyed. However, we get the introduction of the Borg sphere, which is the ship that travels back in time, and we see what could happen if the Borg ultimately succeeded in assimilating everyone on Earth because of First Contact not happening. So, of course, the Enterprise goes back in time, and we get introduced to Zefram Cochrane, played by James Cromwell, who was in an episode of TNG, but I forget the name of the episode, so if you know the name of the episode, then put it in the comments section. That'd be great, thanks. And also his co-pilot, Lily, played by Alfred Woodard, who played the principal in the movie Radio, along with Ed Harris and Cuba Gooding Jr. Interesting, isn't it? And she's also Jonathan Frakes' godmother. I'm not kidding. Alfred Woodard is the godmother of Jonathan Frakes. So, actually, what the twist? So, yeah, if you want to know how I knew that, it's called A Commentary. The one by Jonathan Frakes. It's awesome. So, anywho, the shanty town, I guess you could call it, the Lily Cochrane, right? Of course, gets, blowed up by the Borg. But thankfully, the Enterprise shows up to blow up the Borg ship. And all the Borg are pretty much destroyed. Or so we think. So anywho, Picard and some of the others then beam down, and of course Lily's there protecting the ship, called the Phoenix. But unfortunately she's suffering from theta radiation poisoning, so Dr. Crusher beams her back up to the Enterprise in order to help her out. But of course, since there was damage to the Phoenix, Picard then contacts Geordi to tell him to bring a team down, and of course it does. But unfortunately, they notice some weird things happening. Like it's starting to get a little warm on the ship. Interesting. And of course, then it's revealed that some of the Borg escaped onto the Enterprise. Of course, when the Enterprise arrived in the year 2063, their shields went down. Whoopsies! So that's how that happened. And of course, now we have Picard on the ship, and Riker and the others on the colony trying to find Cochrane and convince him to do the warp flight, or else humanity will be destroyed, or assimilated, actually. But, what can you say? So anywho, but during all the confusion, Lily somehow escapes, and then she gets, of course, then she runs into Picard. And while that's going on, there's this whole big fight scene involving some of the Enterprise crew killing Borg and kicking Borg ass and taking names. Oh yeah! But unfortunately, during their plan to go into engineering and puncture one of the plasma coolant tanks, Data gets captured and we get introduced to the Borg Queen, played by Alice Krige, who sadly will only reprise the role in the final episode of Voyager. But of course, the character itself does come back in Voyager, but it's played by a totally different actress. Why? I have no idea. So anywho, Riker, Troy, and Geordi ultimately convince Cochrane in order to do his warp flight, but he's still not sure about it. And of course he gets stalked by a lot of people, including Barclay. I mean, seriously, how the hell did that guy wind up in the movie anyway? Oh well. What can you say, really? So anywho, the warp flight then gets underway, but unfortunately there's some more shit going on in the Enterprise, and of course Picard finds out that the Borg are building an interplexing beacon, which of course will pretty much call in the Borg that are still in the Delta Quadrant, and humanity is not gonna be in a pretty good position. So yeah, and of course, before all that, Picard was spreading Starfleet gospel to Lily, and of course there was that whole scene on the holodeck where Picard pretty much went all ape shit on some of his Borg crew, but oh well, what can you say? So anyhow, they succeed in destroying the they succeed in stopping the Borg from activating their beacon. Everything's okay again, but unfortunately, the Borg are still adapting to pretty much anything that the Enterprise crew does, well, except for whacking them with the phaser rifles. I mean, why don't they just try doing that? The Borg can't adapt to that, so why don't you just try that? But of course, then the crew ultimately suggest that they use the self-destruct, but of course Picard ain't doing that. And of course we get another ripping off of Moby Dick, just like in Star Trek 2, except this time Picard ultimately agrees in order to initiate the self-destruct. But of course Picard ultimately decides to stay on because he senses that Data is still there. So anywho, Picard then goes in to save Data, and while that's going on, the Phoenix ultimately succeeds in its warp flight. Yay! Then Data punctures one of the plasma coolant tanks, defeats the Borg Queen. First contact is still maintained, and Picard and Lily ultimately leave as friends. So there we go. But still, Star Trek First Contact is actually not that bad of a movie. It's definitely one of the best of the best. It's right up there with Wrath of Khan, all things considered, so there you go. And of course, this film was directed by, who else? Jonathan Frakes, who of course has directed some episodes of TNG, DS9, Voyager, I think, and I'm not sure if he directed any episodes of Enterprise, but, oh well, what can you say? So yeah, now that the look at the movie is over, time to look at the film factoids. Yay! Okay, here we go. Stop it. Okay, there we go. Alright. The character Zefram Cochrane was first seen in the original series episode Metamorphosis, played by Glenn Corbett. There are differences between the original Cochrane and this character, most notably Kirk's identification of Zefram Cochrane of Alpha Centauri, but they are both noted spaceflight pioneers. This Zefram Cochrane role was actually written for James Cromwell. Tom Hanks was also considered for the role, but he was unavailable as he was filming That Thing You Do. Glenn Corbett could not reprise the role because he died from lung cancer in 1993. Yikes. For inspiration, prior to filming, director Jonathan Frakes said that he viewed the films Aliens, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Blade Runner, and Jaws. Ooh, interesting. The Borg makeup and suits had to be constantly touched up. Several of the Borg actors lost a considerable amount of weight while in costume due to heat of the sets and temperature in LA during the shooting. Oh, that's obvious. At the end of filming, actor-director Jonathan Frakes got the nickname Two Takes Frakes because of the efficiency of his style. And last but not least, the deflector dish is labeled AE-35, the name of a component of a satellite dish in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Very interesting, if I do say so myself. Okay, well, that's my look at Star Trek First Contact. And in a little while here, I'll be looking at Star Trek Insurrection, the second and sadly last film directed by Jonathan Frakes. Man, I'm starting to notice a little pattern here. It's like the only Star Trek actor that's directed one movie was Shatner. Thank God. But anywho, Well, like I said, I'll be back in a little while to look at Star Trek Insurrection. So until then, live long and prosper. Peace out. Bye.